Looking for a Northeast destination that pulls out all the stops? As one of the longest operating ski areas not just in the region but in the world, Stowe has been a go-to ski vacation spot for generations. Stowe sits in northern Vermont, and its location makes it a bit colder and less convenient to reach than many competitors. But is Stowe good enough to justify the extra drive? In this video, we'll go through Stowe's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. If you find this information helpful, be sure to like this video and hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where you can follow along for exclusive content you won't see in our videos. While it isn't the largest ski resort on the East Coast, Stowe offers a 485-acre skiable footprint comprising two distinct mountains with well-rounded terrain. These two mountains include the Mount Mansfield side, which offers terrain for all abilities but is overall more advanced in nature, and the Spruce Peak side, which is more family-oriented with race training in mind. The two sides are connected by the base-to-base over-easy gondola, which boasts a brisk 2-minute ride time. We wouldn't say Stowe is exactly oriented towards those learning how to ski or snowboard, but the beginner experience has gotten better thanks to recent enhancements. The Spruce Peak side offers the best selection of learning terrain at the resort, with a decently sized bunny hill complex consisting of two relatively short lifts. One of these lifts, the Adventure Triple, services an exclusive trail that winds around condos and offers more character than a typical bunny slope. Green runs on the Mansfield side have historically been lacking in investment, but the new Sunrise 6 chair brings high-speed lift service to Stowe's existing green terrain for the first time ever. That, combined with some regrading near the top of the lift, has allowed for more and better beginner options off the face of Mansfield than in years past. Besides the Sunrise lift, the Mansfield side's green runs are constrained to the toll house area, but guests should pretty much avoid this area unless parked over there, as it's a flat, neglected mountain area served by a miserably slow double chair. While none of Stowe's other chairs directly serve any green runs, most beginners shouldn't have a huge problem getting down the upper section of the toll road trail served by the Forerunner lift, and this is a great run to test the waters before progressing to the next level. Stowe offers a very strong selection of intermediate slopes. With the exception of the aforementioned toll house, every mountain area offers some flavor of this type of terrain. Most runs under the gondola and on Spruce Peak are nice, groomed cruisers, while the Forerunner lift services a few enjoyable blue runs as well. The new Sunrise 6 makes it a lot more convenient to lap many of the blues on the Mansfield side without lapping the top part of Forerunner over and over again. However, if you go over to the Sensation Quad on the Spruce Peak side, there is a catch. If you choose to stick exclusively to blue trails, there's no way to get back to the base without engaging in some mild hiking. This wasn't always the case, but Stowe closed a couple of trails in this area about a decade ago to reorient it for racing. That being said, the upper Main Street and Main Street headwall runs in this area used to be blues. These trails provide routes back down to the base and should be doable for most intermediates. When it comes to advanced and expert terrain, Stowe offers some of the most demanding terrain anywhere on the East Coast. The most difficult runs are on the Mansfield side. While the Spruce Peak side does have some advanced level terrain, its toughest runs are much tamer. The Forerunner lift serves Stowe's famed front four. These include the Goat and Star trails, which deliver narrow, steep, and demandingly variable conditions, and the close by Lift Line and National trails, which aren't quite as narrow or variable but offer similarly pitched terrain. These trails are long too, putting a strain on one's endurance. The Chin Clip trail off the gondola, while not as difficult terrain-wise as the front four, maintains a long sustained pitch that you can't bail on for the bottom 2/3 of the run. A number of unmarked woods areas off both Forerunner and the gondola are really demanding as well. Stowe offers two terrain parks on the Mansfield side, but the setup lags behind others in Vermont. The freestyle trails boast some family-friendly snow features and a number of small to medium jumps, boxes, and rails, but the setup is much more focused on beginner progression, and there aren't any features designed for advanced and expert freestylers. If freestyle terrain is your primary interest, there are a lot better options out there. Stowe's northern Vermont location allows it to offer very strong East Coast snow quality. Each season, the resort typically experiences more snow events and fewer freeze-thaw cycles than competing ski areas further south. This means that natural conditions at Stowe are often better than central and southern Vermont competitors. Stowe employs snowmaking on a sizable chunk of its footprint to ensure reliable operations throughout the season. But not every trail sees snowmaking, and conditions, like at other Vermont resorts, can be heavily variable. Stowe does see its fair share of warm weather days, and thin cover and icy terrain, while less common than resorts further south, do occur with some regularity. Stowe is pretty conservative when it comes to opening many of its best expert runs, making it tough to reliably plan for the resort's most extreme terrain. Trying to hit GOAT or Star if it hasn't snowed in a few days or if it's any time before late January, better cross your fingers that they're open. As the only northern Vermont resort on the Epic Pass, Stowe gets packed during peak times, and crowd flow is a mixed bag. On busy days, the Mansfield Gondola is the worst lift to be at on the mountain. Lines get atrociously long at this enclosed, intermediate-oriented lift, and there aren't any helper lifts to service the same terrain, making it a substantial choke point. Lines for the Forerunner Quad can get very long as well, although this lift is relieved by the essentially parallel lookout double in the just installed Sunrise 6. Crowd management could use some work. If there are multiple different line mazes to get on the same lift, you might end up waiting twice as long just because you picked the wrong one. In addition, the gondola's singles line doesn't start until you get to the entrance barn, meaning that there's no segmentation structure at the start of the line if the crowd extends out of there. Fortunately, the crowd flow on the less trafficked Spruce Peak side is much smoother. Stowe's on-mountain facilities are also a mixed bag, albeit with some notable improvements this past season. The Mansfield side offers convenient summit lodges at the top of both Forerunner and the gondola, but the Forerunner lodge is relatively small and offers very limited seating at peak times. The Mansfield-based facilities have some rather frustrating logistical issues. The Midway Lodge on the gondola side is several feet up from the start of the gondola and only accessible by taking a lift up to the top. This makes it incredibly inconvenient to reach from the base, and especially annoying on days when the lines are bad. The other option is the Mansfield Lodge near the bases of the Forerunner, Lookout, and Sunrise chairs. This lodge is thankfully much easier to get to and leave than in previous seasons thanks to the new Sunrise lift, but it's still fairly hard to spot and not immediately apparent if you end up at the bottom of the Forerunner or Lookout chairs. If you park near the gondola and want to stop in a lodge at the beginning or end of the day, it's going to be a hassle. Luckily, it only takes a short over-easy gondola ride to get to the Spruce Peak base, where the base facilities are much better. The Spruce Peak Base Lodge is centrally located and offers plenty of space, even during peak times. The Spruce Peak side's footprint is relatively small compared to the Mansfield side, and the only public lodge above the base is a bathroom at the Sensation Quad loading area. Getting around the rest of Stowe isn't bad. High-speed lifts now service nearly all major terrain pods. Informative signage makes few areas difficult to miss. In most cases, it's quick and easy to physically travel from one mountain area to another, although the aforementioned base camp road trail out of the Sensation Quad area and the route directly from the over-easy gondola to the Forerunner Quad can require some catwalking. Stowe is one of the more aesthetically pleasing resorts as far as East Coast ski areas go. The Mount Mansfield side looks and feels unique thanks to its striking, often snow-capped mountaintops, but it can be quite disappointing to realize the resort doesn't extend all the way to the top of these peaks. But if you're really determined, you can hike to them for some of the most extreme, otherworldly backcountry terrain you'll find anywhere in Vermont. The hike can take up to 45 minutes, but it's like nothing else within easy reach of a ski resort on a good day. Runs either merge directly back into the resort, or end on Route 108 for a catwalk back. If you do end up venturing into the backcountry, keep in mind that these areas are unpatrolled, so be sure to bring proper backcountry equipment with you. The Spruce Peak side consists of less unique topography than the Mansfield side, but it also offers access to some backcountry and sports a trail to the Smuggler's Notch ski area via a short hike. On clear days, both resort sides offer fantastic, uninhibited views of one another. Stowe has become more built up in recent years, and the Spruce Peak base area is now home to many stores and condos. Half of the old midway slope at Mount Mansfield, previously a bunny hill, has been converted into a parking lot. But there's very little buildup on the slopes themselves, and many competitors are much worse offenders. Stowe's northern Vermont location means it's a long drive to reach from major northeast metropolitan areas. With no traffic, the drive takes approximately 6 hours from the New York City area, and it takes about 3.5 from Boston. On the other hand, the drive from the Canadian city of Montreal takes only about 2.5 hours, making it the closest major city to Stowe. Burlington, which is Vermont's largest city, is about 45 minutes away. All of Stowe's on-site hotel and condo rentals exist at the Spruce Peak and Toll House bases. These accommodations are incredibly luxurious, but they're quite pricey and out of budget for the vast majority of travelers, especially when it comes to the Spruce Peak offerings. More reasonably priced options exist on the access road and in the nearby town of Stowe, which is actually a couple of miles south of the resort with which it shares its name. For the most economical options that are still within reasonable driving distance, visitors may want to explore options a bit further away in the towns of Waterbury or Morrisville. However, Stowe's access road traffic has always been a serious problem, and guests who don't stay on site may find themselves waiting in hours-long traffic jams during the busiest holiday mornings. This past season, Stowe made a major change to their parking policy, implementing paid parking on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays at all lots except for the cross-country center and toll house area. This change has definitely cut down on crowds and access road traffic, but the remaining free lots are pretty inconvenient compared with Stowe's other parking options. But not everyone has to pay for parking. Guests can avoid the parking fee by carpooling in vehicles carrying 4 or more individuals. Stowe isn't the biggest party mountain on the East Coast, but the resort offers a few strong après-ski and nightlife spots. A number of on-mountain bars offer terrific vibes after the slopes close. Most bars in town are tied to pub-like restaurants, and many close right after dinner time. That said, a few do stay open later, even on weekdays, and can be great places to unwind after a tough day on the slopes. Stowe suffers from heavy crowding at peak times and may not offer the most convenient base facilities, but this resort delivers a combination of quality snow, modern lift service, and challenging terrain that's really difficult to beat on the East Coast. In addition, easy access to outstanding Vermont backcountry terrain will appeal to Vermont's most adventurous skiers and riders. Lift tickets are among the most pricey in the state, with one-day adult rates going as high as $185 for a single day at the resort. However, Stowe is part of the Epic Pass Suite, and guests who purchase either day or season pass products before early December can access the resort for a much more reasonable rate. Ultimately, not everyone will want to make the commitment to drive all the way up to Stowe, but for the right folks, the resort may well be worth it. Now let's go through how Stowe stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Stowe's natural accumulation is very good for the East Coast, only falling short to a handful of other resorts, and the mountain gets a 6 for snow. Stowe's northern location and generally strong snowmaking keep it a reliable option throughout the season, but the most demanding terrain is not consistently open, and the resort gets a 6 for resiliency. Stowe boasts a 485-acre skiable footprint and a 1,327-acre footprint from boundary to boundary, making it decently sized but still smaller than many competitors, and the resort gets a 3 for size. Stowe boasts a well-rounded selection of terrain for the East Coast, and gets a 7 for terrain diversity. Stowe's blacks and double blacks earn their rating, with taxing, high-consequence lines on the toughest trails, and the resort gets an 8 for challenge. Stowe's lifts are generally modern, with the Toll House Double being the glaring exception, and there's now high-speed lift service available for all levels of terrain, earning the resort an 8 for lifts. Stowe's crowds can still get really bad on peak weekends and holidays, especially at the gondola, but the sunrise lift and parking changes have improved things this year, and the resort now earns a 4 for crowd flow, up from a score of 3 last season. Stowe's on-mountain facilities are nice, but accessing the Mansfield side lodges will still cause some headaches among guests even after recent improvements, and the resort gets a 6 for facilities. Despite consisting of 2 separate mountains with no direct trail connection, Stowe is generally still pretty intuitive to get around and gets a 7 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Stowe isn't the most isolated or local ski area on the East Coast, but it's hard to deny the beauty of the resort's natural topography, and the resort earns a 6 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 61, placing Stowe second in Vermont. Stowe faces some stiff competition, and some of the mountains on this list, including Killington and Sugarbush, offer similarly comparable overall experiences without the same travel time required from major cities. But Stowe offers nearly everything that typical East Coast travelers can expect from a high-quality ski vacation, and absent the excess crowding during peak times, it really doesn't fall short in any notable way. In addition, if taking Stowe's backcountry terrain into account, the resort becomes the undisputed standout in this region. For many, the drive and available lodging will be the deciding factor between Stowe and its upper-tier competitors. For more information on Stowe and over 80 North American ski resort destinations, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.